What's going on, everybody? It's Ryan Heath with Fantasy Points here, and welcome back to Data Points. This is the show where I walk you through exactly how to win at DFS, how to dominate your prop bets, and how to win your seasonal fantasy football league championships. It's championship week this week, week 17. Let's dive into the Fantasy Points data suite and see what I have to show you this week. What?
Why are you shaking your head?
You're welcome.
So for data point number one, we are starting off here in advanced receiving defense. You can see I have highlighted the Buffalo Bills. They have allowed the highest target share to opposing backfields as I've sorted here. And also I have gone ahead and targeted alignment, selected backfield. We go ahead and hit apply there. We can check out some of the other stats in terms of what they're allowing for receiving production to backfields. Just sorting by receiving yards per game. Yeah, they have allowed the most receiving yards per game to opposing backfields as well. The most targets. Yeah, the Bills have been funneling lots of receiving volume to running backs. We have known this all season. This is probably the third or fourth time I've brought it up on this very show, but just good to remind us, right? And you can see it come through here as well in the schedule adjusted fantasy points per game allowed. They have allowed, here's Buffalo, they've allowed the most schedule adjusted receiving fantasy points to opposing running backs, plus 3.7. So that's a great matchup through the air for Breece Hall. And another thing here to just kind of pay attention to is back here in advanced receiving defense, I have gone ahead and filtered for only throws within 10 yards of the line of scrimmage, just to kind of illustrate this another way. The Bills are also funneling everything underneath. So not downfield, but on throws within 10 yards of the line of scrimmage. They're allowing the sixth most receiving yards per game. They're much lower if we were to filter by 20 or more. So yeah, shallow throws, everything to running backs, all gets funneled underneath. And that's because the Bills play all of these too high looks. It's just kind of by design with their defense. As you can see here in the coverage matrix, yeah, they're second or fourth highest in terms of rate of too high looks. That is kind of the big reason that they are allowing and funneling all of this to running backs. So getting into Breece Hall himself, I know he's had kind of an up and down season, both in terms of his fantasy results and also his usage. But you can see here, we're in the weekly snap share report. Hall was obviously hurt and very limited for a few games, but in week 16, back up to a 79% snap share. That's pretty much at his high end for the year, where he's been when he's fully healthy. So that's what I'm going to assume, that Hall is just a full go, should continue seeing these large snap shares. I don't think the Jets were all that happy with the results when Hall was out. So yeah, would expect him to continue to be a bell cow. If we look in terms of route share as well, Hall was up to 64% last week. Again, that's just about as high as it's gotten for him. That would actually lead all running backs over the full season. No running back has averaged above a 63% route share throughout the year. So if it stays like that, then yeah, Hall is seeing some of the best receiving usage in the league right now. And that makes him pretty interesting, especially for DFS this week, where it's a short slate. There aren't all that many amazing running back values. Hall is priced down quite a bit. And you can also get pretty easy access to his props at sports books around the industry. Yeah, his receiving yardage props are way too low, which is often the case for running backs against the Bills. So that's just an angle I kind of really like this week. I think Hall also works in Aaron Rodgers double stacks if you're playing those in DFS, just because of the receiving game usage there. We've seen Hall outscore Garrett Wilson a few times over the past several weeks. So I do think he's live in those Rodgers stacks as well. Moving on to data point number 2, I want to talk about the Green Bay Packers and this matchup with the Minnesota Vikings. So we're here in the run pass report. I've sorted by neutral pass rate. So how often teams are passing in score neutral situations. And you can see, okay, the Packers are at the bottom of the league in terms of neutral pass rate. They have really been committing to the run with Josh Jacobs recently, but importantly, when the Packers get down, so here trailing by 7, if I sort by this, you can see, okay, the Packers are actually throwing over 70% of the time when they're trailing, and that's league average, which makes sense, right? Obviously, the Josh Jacobs stuff has been working really well for them recently, but Jordan Love is still a very talented quarterback. They have talented receivers. They know that they can throw if they need to when they're down. And with them as 1-point underdogs this week, I think there's a very good chance we get a negative game script for the Packers. And if that's the case, then we could just be in for some unbelievable fantasy production from them. Talking a little bit more just about this game environment, too, I want to point out here in the weekly pass rate over expectation report, the Vikings are a top 6 pass funnel this year. They do kind of invite teams to throw against them. They have a very tough run defense. So even from a game plan perspective, I wouldn't be surprised to see the Packers just kind of come out a little pass heavier, even if the game script isn't necessarily lending them to that. And then you can see it here as well, the Vikings allowing all this production to wide receivers through the air. The most schedule adjusted fantasy points per game allowed to wide receivers overall. Over the last 5, the most allowed to receivers lining up out wide. So the Jordan Love stacks are looking amazing. And then kind of finally here, schematically, the Vikings play a ton of zone coverage. They rank top 6 in the league, play it over 75% of the time. And that's perfect for Jordan Love. We're here in advanced passing. I have filtered for only plays with zone coverage, which you can do by clicking that button right there. Love averages over 9 yards per attempt against zone this year. That ranks 3rd best behind only Lamar Jackson and Brock Purdy. That compares to about 6 yards per attempt against man coverage. So Love is seeing almost a 50% boost in his efficiency against zone coverage, which again, the Vikings play a ton of. And this comes through in his top receivers as well. Here in advanced receiving, done the same thing, just filtered for zone coverage, sorted by yards per out run. We can see here Jayden Reed ranks top 3 in the league in yards per out run against zone coverage, only behind Puka Nacua and Jamar Chase. I know that's a little bit surprising based on kind of the frustrating fantasy season Jayden Reed has been having. But especially if we get Christian Watson out, I'm very, very excited for Jayden Reed in terms of the upside. Tucker Kraft looks great in DFS as well. Dontavian Wicks can be a big value with where he's priced in DFS. I'm going to be rolling out a lot of Jordan Love triple stacks, double stacks, triple stacks, just really leaning into that scenario where the Packers have to throw for once, because just everything about this matchup is telling me that it's going to end up in a lot of fantasy points, right? Moving on, finally, for data point number 3, I want to talk about Calvin Ridley. So we're back here in schedule adjusted fantasy points per game allowed. Ridley gets the Jaguars this week, revenge game. They have allowed the 4th most schedule adjusted to outside wide receivers, but they rank pretty average against the slot. So that is what I like to call a perimeter funnel, which is going to benefit Ridley a lot. Here, just overall for the defense in terms of what the Jaguars have allowed, advanced receiving defense, I have filtered for only targets going 20 or more yards downfield in the air. And you can see the Jaguars have allowed the most deep receiving yards per game. So that's great for Ridley, obviously, because he gets a lot of deep targets per game. I've done the same thing, filtered for 20 or more yards downfield. Ridley is top 5 in deep targets per game. I guess top 3 if you don't count Rashid Shaheed, who hasn't played in a long time. So yeah, about 2 deep targets per game for Ridley. His catchable air yards also go up a ton with Mason Rudolph. He leads the league with over 90 catchable air yards per game in Mason Rudolph starts. So yeah, this could be a very big upside game for Ridley. And finally, schematically, it plays to his favor as well. The Jaguars playing the 2nd most man coverage in the league, over 40% of the time. And then back here in advanced receiving, filtered for man coverage right here. Yards per out run, Calvin Ridley tied for 6th in the league in yards per out run against man, over 3 yards per out run. Could definitely see Ridley putting up a big score this week. He's pretty cheap in DFS. He's obviously a great kind of upside play in seasonal leagues, and I'm pretty excited for him. So that's going to be it, guys. Thank you so much, as always, for tuning in. And now that you've seen how powerful the data suite can be, make sure you go sign up for access for yourself at data.fantasypoints.com. We have the early bird specials running at Fantasy Points. You can get discounted access for next year as well. Make sure you check that out. And good luck in week 17 in your fantasy championships, guys. I hope you succeed. I hope you win. Have an amazing weekend.